Water takes up almost 3/4 of the Earth's surface and is vital to all plants and plants. Water plays an important role in many of plants' processes and is essential for growth. Water is a primary component in photosynthesis, the process used by plants to convert light energy into chemical energy. During the first step of energy transduction reactions, water is split into oxygen and hydrogen molecules, which is important for subsequent steps of photosynthesis. Water is also the primary component of transpiration, which is the loss of water vapor, mostly through the stomata of the leaves. Water is important for regulating the stomata opening and closing. Water enters the guard cells following potassium influx. The guard cells become turgid, causing the stomata to open. To close the stomata, water follows potassium efflux out of the cells. The guard cells become flaccid and the stomata close. Water also plays important roles for root growth in the soil, seed germination, and is used to maintain water potential and relative water content within the plant, as well as it also acts as a solvent to transport the products of photosynthesis. However, plants can become stressed when there is too much or not enough water, and they must adapt in order to survive.
Oh, hi there. Welcome to the WSHC, the Water Stress Headquarters of Canada. I was just sitting here doing some research on water stress, of course, and I thought maybe you'd like to know a little bit about it. One of the first words that comes to mind when you think water stress is drought. However, drought can be grouped under the term of water limiting stress. Non-water limiting stress can also be defined as saline habitats, which is when there is too much salt in a habitat and the plant cannot take water up into its roots. On the other hand, low temperatures can cause cell dehydration, along with ice crystals that form inside the plant, making it difficult for the plant to access that water. Drought, on the other hand, is a water limiting condition. So in meteorological terms, it's just defined as a lack of rainfall. Drought is when an organism in an environment is not gaining enough water in order to function at optimal levels. It can occur for a short time, or in other cases, it can occur for a very long time, even up to several years. Specifically in plants, drought impacts growth, crop yield, membrane integrity, osmotic adjustment, pigment content, water relations, and photosynthetic activity. Thanks for listening.
An example of short-term drought can be seen here in this picture. The plant is wilting, which often occurs around midday, when a plant's transpiration and water loss is greater than its rate of water absorption. The effects of long-term drought can be seen in these pictures of the Sonoran Desert, located in the southwest United States. Data collected in 2006 by the University of Arizona has been compiled into this graph. It shows that during the months of April, May, and June, there are drought conditions, where less than 0.25 inches of precipitation are recorded. An extreme case of long-term drought is the Atacama Desert of Chile. Rainfall was not recorded in some areas of the Atacama for hundreds of years, making it one of the driest places on the planet. These graphs show that in most parts of the Atacama, no more than 1.5 inches of rainfall is recorded per month, making it very difficult for plant life to survive.
Conditions, soil's water potential is often reduced. At the morphological level, plant growth is affected by drought stress, which is seen in drooping plant source tissue and impaired germination in sink tissue. It is likely that crops' yields are so affected because gas exchange is disrupted due to stomatal closure. Stomatal closure also reduces carbon dioxide intake levels, which inhibits leaf expansion and development. At the physiological level, most plants exhibit an increase in root-to-shoot ratio. The root system is also involved in a signal cascade that invokes the appropriate stress response level using osmolytes such as abscisic acid, cytokinins, ethylene, and malate. ABA promotes the efflux of potassium ions into guard cells of the stomata. This leads to a decrease in turgor pressure, which ultimately leads to the closing of stomata. Many of the major components of photosynthesis are disrupted by drought, such as the thylakoid electron transfer chain, the carbon reduction cycle, and the supply of carbon dioxide as mediated by the stomata. Pigment oxidation and chlorophyll degradation is typical of oxidative stress. As a result of dehydration stress, there is a decrease in chlorophyll content, chloroplast membrane, and there are changes in the ratio of chlorophyll A, B, and carotenoids in a variety of plant species. Proline is a carbohydrate that accumulates as a first response to drought conditions to cell injury. Succulent leaves and stems, sunken stomata, reduced transpiring surfaces, waxy cuticles, periods of dormancy limited to transpiration in the sun during the day, and specialized photosynthetic pathways such as C3, C4, and CAM photosynthesis.
Hi, my name is Jason, and as my esteemed colleague mentioned before, drought is one of the main things that can affect plants in a negative way. Now, on the opposite end of the spectrum, having an excess of water can also be very detrimental to plants. As you might have heard the old idiom, too much of a good thing is not good. Well, the same thing applies here to plants. Now, in the long run and short run, too much water can be detrimental for a plant's growth and overall health. And throughout different mechanisms, they have to find a way to either endure or overcome this excess of water. Now, the first thing that is caused because of excess water is that the soil diffusion rate within the soil is severely decreased. This happens because microorganisms and roots within the soil deplete the remnant oxygen supply and cause the environment to either become hypoxic, which means that their mitochondrial respiration is just limited, or become anoxic, which means that the mitochondrial respiration is completely inhibited. Now, the second condition that can be caused because of an excess of water is that the plant growth can be severely limited. This can be caused because of the reduction oxygenation potential, or redox potential as most of us know it, is decreased. As well, there can be a buildup of sulfides, soluble magnesium, soluble iron, or ethanol within the plant. As you can see here, there are three different scenarios that can be caused by excess water. The first scenario on the left is what is known as waterlogging, which involves only the root system being submerged underwater. The second and third scenarios both involve the flooding of water, but are dependent on factors such as developmental stage, size, or physical structure. Shown here in the middle is partial submergence, which occurs when only a portion of the shoot system and the entire root system is underwater. This can be compared to going outside after a long rainfall and stepping in the wet, squishy grass in your backyard. On the far right, you can see complete submergence, which occurs when both the root and shoot systems are fully beneath the water level. This is the most stressful scenario on the plant.
Hi, my name is Dr. Hootie, and I'm a hydrometrics technician here at Environment Canada. Today I'm here to talk to you about a few of the effects that Hurricane Sandy had on our beautiful plants and the unique responses that a lot of them had to endure in order to overcome this tough time. Depending on whether a plant is undergoing partial or complete submergence, the plant will respond in a number of different methods. For partial submergence, plants have developed anatomical, morphological, physiological, and biochemical responses. In contrast, however, plants that have undergone complete submergence have developed independent responses from these. And here they are.
Anatomically, some plants have been able to adapt to the stress of partial submergence by modification of its cortex into a tissue called parenchyma. The cortex will undergo lysogeny, separating, dissolving, and creating this new form of parenchyma tissue containing air spaces between its stem and leaves as a response to ethylene formation. These changes are a result of phenotypic plasticity, which is defined as the ability of a single genotype to modify its phenotype under heterogeneous environmental conditions. With parenchyma, plants become buoyant, allowing shoots to continue being exposed to the atmosphere. Plants are able to continue transporting oxygen from the shoots to the submerged roots, therefore enabling them to continue growing despite being faced with anaerobic conditions. Depending on the signal and thus the destruction pattern of the cortex cells, Arenchyma has developed a variety of types with cells of different shapes and sizes. Common examples include the bicycle wheel, the honeycomb, non-organized structure, and the spider web. Another anatomical response to prolonged inundation is the formation of hypertrophied lenticles, which are enlarged perforations on the stems of woody plants. This response allows for a greater quantity of oxygen uptake by way of the stem reaching to the roots. Lenticles also allow for the elimination of harmful and volatile compounds such as ethanol, which is metabolically produced, therefore maintaining water homeostasis within the plant. Next, plants have undergone morphological changes, many of which supersede the typical plant structures based on effectiveness. Adventitious roots are a replacement to the typical plant root, whose formation is triggered by ethylene. These plant roots provide the same functions as typical roots, however, they typically originate from the stem, contain pores, and generally grow above ground. This allows for the continuous water and nutrient uptake under these stressful water conditions. Another morphological adaptation is hyponastic growth in plants. This type of growth is most commonly found in flooded plants. It is a response of plants moving their leaves upwards and enabling them to grow vertically and therefore as far away from the water as possible. It is for this reason that when two plants of the same species are compared, one that is living in normal conditions and the other having undergone flooding conditions, the flooded plant will be noticeably taller than the normal condition plant. Physiological changes in plants can include a number of steps. In flood-sensitive species, despite conformational changes to the plant, which results in reduced water uptake, the plant is still bound to die. Some plant species have changed, however, and have developed a tolerance for excess water exposure. These flood-tolerant plants will either hardly be effective, that includes leaves, water potential, and gas exchange, or the flood-tolerant plants will endure negative effects on these factors. Another physiological response prevents the process of photosynthesis from occurring in plants. This can be caused by 1. The loss of turgor pressure or water in the guard cells of plant leaves, or 2. The closure of the guard cells caused by ABA. Both of these result in a limitation to obtain CO2, causing for the plant's inability to undergo photosynthesis. The next physiological response is one that responds to radial oxygen loss, or ROL in plants. Plants that are not tolerant to excess water stress have roots with thin and barrier-free cortices. Because of this, these plants experience a significant amount of oxygen loss radially as the oxygen is being transported down the root in a vertical manner. This continuous loss of oxygen in the roots prevents any oxygen from reaching the root apex and in turn inhibits the roots from growing. In contrast to this, many water-tolerant plants have developed a physiological adaptation which allows for a strong cortex barrier along the length of the roots, which prevents ROL. Because of this, oxygen is now able to travel down the root and reach the apex, which allows for deeper root growth in these flooded soils. This gives rise to the aerobic zone, which is where all of the oxygen passes subsequent to having reached the apex. Biochemically, water stress can cause plants to create reactive substances which are toxic for plants and can cause cells to be damaged or killed. ROS, reactive oxygen species, is one of the main ones which is formed during certain reduction or oxidation reactions of water by the chloroplast or mitochondrial electron transfer chains. Common examples of ROS include hydrogen peroxide as well as superoxide anions. Plants have developed a response for the elimination of these reactive species caused by excess water. This is called plant scavenging and can be done by the employment of both enzymatic and non-enzymatic antioxidants. As one can see, plants have developed ways to respond to the stress of partial submergence by using whatever exposure to the atmosphere remaining and amplifying its functionality. When plants experience complete submergence, however, this is no longer possible as a plant has no access to the air, and therefore plants have developed alternative methods for dealing with that issue. Complete submergence is the most stressful scenario that plants can endure. It can be divided into two categories, shallow submergence and deep submergence. Shallow submergence is when the water level covering the plant is less than 0.5 to 1 meter, therefore providing a chance for plants to exceed the water level by means of elongations of the shoots. Conversely, deep submergence is when the water levels exceed 1 meter and there is no chance that the plant will be able to overcome this stress by desubmergence. Shallow submergence plants will undergo an escape strategy known as low oxygen escape syndrome. In this response, the plants will rely on the elongation of its shoots to come in contact with the atmosphere, offering plants an increased chance of survival under shallow, long-term flooding. Deep submergence plants will undergo a strategy known as low oxygen quiescence syndrome, since escaping is not an option for these plants. In this state, the plants will remain put and keep a constant rate of energy conservation. This will be effective for a period of about 2 weeks long or less. There are some other additional traits that plants undergoing complete submergence develop. First, the presence of a plant plastron, which is a thin layer formed at the surface of submerged leaves. They essentially allow for stomata to remain open, as well as improved photosynthetic and oxygenation activity while submerged. Secondly, some plants have developed aquatic leaves which favor obtaining light from being underwater. This benefits the plant by improving photosynthetic activity.